I'd like to call this special Saline City Council meeting to order. If you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, Council Members Seo, Dillon, Delorco, Kamara, Sulek, and Kraus. From City staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, and Assistant City Manager Getzman. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments?
So moved.
Moved by Gearbaugh to approve as submitted, seconded by Dillon. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We have no absences this evening, so we'll proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments this evening? And Clerk Royal, did we receive any comments in writing in advance of tonight's meeting? No, sir. Okay, the record will reflect there are no citizen comments. Then we'll proceed to the one and only business item, which is 22-00, proposed ordinance 839, temporary moratorium on acceptance and processing of new applications for adult use establishments and medical marijuana facility municipal licenses. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt and to approve and adopt or not to approve proposed ordinance number 839, an ordinance to impose an emergency temporary moratorium on the acceptance and processing of new applications for adult use establishments and medical marijuana facility municipal licenses regulated pursuant to City of Saline Code Chapter 22, Article 5, Adult Use Marijuana Establishments, and Article 6, Medical Marijuana Facilities.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh to acknowledge, to approve, and to adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. City Manager O'Toole, do you care to make a comment this evening?
The moratorium presented here is in response to the conversation that we had during our last regular council meeting. I will note in discussion with Attorney Forshee, who is present as well, we may suggest if council does elect to adopt that they make the Section 2 header read effective date and time so that it is clear that it becomes effective at the time of adoption and not some earlier date today, as we do have obviously previous applicants who've already submitted.
I think that can be done without objection. Okay. Since he was able to log on this evening, I do want to acknowledge Attorney Forshee. Tom, do you care to make any comments this evening?
Just briefly, Mayor. So when you do a moratorium, you have to do it by another ordinance to put a moratorium on another ordinance rather than just by resolution. So we also made this an emergency ordinance so that it could take effect immediately rather than having a number of days pass. Of course, if more days could pass, there might be more applications that would come in. So we wanted to, have it be effective as soon as possible. And this doesn't do anything substantively to the underlying ordinances. This just puts a halt on accepting and processing applications. The ones that are already in the queue will continue on through the process under the current ordinance. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Very good. City Manager O'Toole, anything further you'd like to add? Well, let me just say this for the record. I think that our policies and ordinances in their totality are good. We took significant time to evaluate, critique before we drafted and subsequently adopted the necessary ordinances for both recreational use and medical marijuana facilities. That having been said, we have been made aware of the fact that there are a few deficiencies, and I think between staff, legal counsel, city council, and our code review committee, those can be worked through, specifically proximity to daycare facilities, and I think also the proximity of one facility to another, among some other issues. This reminds me that the legislative process is often a bit cumbersome and messy. It's been compared to making sausage. But the reality is that on occasion the facts on the ground change, circumstances change, and sometimes it's appropriate to take a step back, to modify, to amend, and to approve. And so that's what I think we're doing here. And as such, I will be enthusiastically supporting the motion offered by Gearbaugh, seconded by Dillon, and look forward to working expeditiously with the entities and groups previously named to make the necessary modifications so that these existing ordinances can be improved and changed, and hopefully those can be done sometime later this summer. With that, I'll open it up for any questions or comments from the dais. Councilmember Kraus and then Mr. Seal.
Thanks, Brian. So this is an interesting decision for me because I just had this conversation with Ms. Dillon at ZBA the other night. I'm a big fan of reevaluating, and things that are in the far past often need to be brought current because life changes, society changes, culture changes. I will be voting no on this, and I will tell you why. The first agreement is I can't wrap my head around shades of legality. Alcohol is legal in the state of Michigan. There is an alcohol joint across the street and down a few feet. That's okay, but a marijuana establishment is not. And so in my brain, if there was legal A and legal B, that argument might work. There aren't shades of legal. It's either legal or it's not. And I think that we really need to work hard to change the stigma of marijuana and how it's dispensed, why it's dispensed, how I look at it for people I know who use it for medical purposes. It's life-saving, and I dare say a lot healthier than many of the opioids and drugs that we may all take in our own prescription cabinet. So I urge us to look inside at what we're putting in our bodies and think about what the damage those do and try to change the stigma. But the bottom line for me is the legality. Alcohol, marijuana, they're both legal. We're going to allow one there but not the other. One more thing I wanted to say as well is that this has been going on, the discussions surrounding this, I think, for like 3 years. I could be wrong. There was a task force. The public has had many, many, many opportunities to weigh in on this. So at the last minute, because there are some comments on a social media site that show concerns that we're going to stop and change things or issue a moratorium, I would really like to see the democratic process work better as far as people coming and speaking when they have the chance and not having comments on a Facebook site drive what we're doing. So I will be voting no.
Fair enough. Mr. Seal, did you still have comments or questions?
I just wanted to clarify that I understand Mr. Forshey exactly correctly. So if we change the ordinance, say to include daycare, so many feet away from daycare, the applications that are already in would not be impacted by such change? Is that correct?
Yes, that's the position the city is taking, that it would, if you already have an application in, it would be under the now existing ordinance.
Okay.
And, yep.
All right. Very good. I just wanted to make sure that we aren't going to cause harm to any of the existing folks by changing the ordinance now while they are already in process.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Mr. Kamara Sulak?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Forshee, does this impact the purchase agreement that's in place for the Mickey's Dairy Twist property?
No, that would be an existing application that's already pretty far down the pipeline. So you'll be seeing that special land use consideration come to you, I believe, on May 16th.
Correct.
Are they
So
approved
that's-
for both adult use and medical?
No, that's just medical. That's the application is just under medical for that one.
Okay,
So
so
that's
this
what we'll
would
carry
impact
forward.
their adult use?
If I can chime in real quick, no, they've already submitted their adult use application at this point. They submitted it on Friday.
Okay.
So they are in under the moratorium deadline.
Okay, great. That was a big concern of mine, that it doesn't have a detrimental impact on that contract that's already been in play, and pull this out on somebody at the 11th hour would be something that we don't want to do. That being said, we've been working on this for a long time, both as the task force, all of our oversight, and I don't know how we missed this, but what kind of precedent does this set by us changing this at the 11th hour and pausing it for 120 days when we've had this in place? I feel we're switching things up all of a sudden where we've had ample time to do this. And what kind of legal risk does this put us at? are we opening ourselves up for any litigation of making this sort of change based on social media and people feeling uncomfortable with there being a dispensary coming, on both sides of town? Or being across from, a nursery center. What is that? How does that potentially impact us from a legal standpoint?
Yeah, so everything that I've heard so far about what would be considered for a change, they're really all just policy decisions. So there's nothing really, no real legal concern that's in the ordinance, but you have wide latitude as a city council to make the law, and it's maybe somewhat unusual to change this early, but there just may be things that have come to light since then, and that's totally legitimate. So you have wide discretion to be able to change the laws as you see fit. I think by allowing the applications that are already in the pipeline to continue on under the ordinance and continue through the process, I think that lessens the litigation risk. I can never guarantee you, I wish I could, that, that someone wouldn't sue or there couldn't be litigation. There could be. This, it places a pause on the process, but we're doing it in the proper way, which is to do another ordinance just to pause the acceptance of applications, which is legitimate and has been upheld by courts to do so if it's for a reasonable time, which usually is 6 months or less is probably the outer limit. Some have gone as long as a year, but we don't suggest that as a matter of policy. So yes, it is a pause in the process, but as the legislative body, you have the ability to do that. And I think you've lessened your risk by allowing the ones that are already in the pipeline to continue to move forward.
Okay, well, I will not be supporting this. It doesn't feel equitable at this late hour, and just seeing that there's nobody here to speak for or against it. I don't know that this information has gotten out into the community in full transparency. So I will not be supporting this.
Additional comments or questions, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaum?
Yeah, just on, when we look at this, and the word transparency at times is defined differently in how it's brought forward, but in this situation, Planning Commission, in terms of approving a special use permit, was not aware that the state allowed us to be able to extend it to pre-K, which something that wasn't discovered by the task force. And at this point in time, we realized that, and a number of the members voiced that opinion. It wasn't social media, it was from our Planning Commission. Also, there was an issue when we first did the ordinance I helped bring about was the issue of co-location, and in our original draft, we didn't allow that, so we made that change. So there's a number of things as we've been moving this forward that have had to be addressed, and so in this situation, it was driven by our Planning Commission, which is a judicial type of body that I thought brought forward a good concern and wanted to have that addressed. There also wasn't part of our review in terms of the application about even addressing what other businesses were around it in that sort of situation. And that's what came up about it because a citizen at the meeting brought forward that concern. I'm looking at this as an adjustment because we've made some changes on this as a result of some concerns that have been brought forward, and I think it's appropriate for us to take a step back and look at it. And that's where we are right now, because we don't want to necessarily place all of these things, and some people in our community have expressed that. So at this point, this is an appropriate thing to do. Whether we do approve it or not, it's a way to at least assess it and to get more input from the public before we have 15, 20, 25 applications come into the city. there's communities that already have 13 or 14 applications that have come in the Michigan, state of Michigan. And at this point, I don't necessarily want to be one of those communities if we have concerns, general concerns from our citizenry, and they want to have those addressed. So this is the best way to approach it.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon?
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. First, to the city manager, how many applications have we received since we announced that we were going to have a special meeting and have a possible moratorium?
I believe at least 2 adult use applications have come in. I apologize, I didn't have a chance to touch base with Assistant Clerk Ritchie before I left the office today. So I believe at least 2.
Okay. So then businesses did have an opportunity to file before we put the moratorium in place. So if that was an avenue they wanted to pursue, they did have that opportunity.
Yes, all of the businesses that had previously submitted a medical application were alerted when we first made our adult use applications available. And that would have been the third week or fourth week perhaps of April, the later half of April.
Okay, thank you. And then 2 questions, and I'm not sure whether they are for you or for Mr. Forshee, which is, would this ordinance be extendable beyond the 120 days for some reason? It doesn't specifically say in there that there's, so just by law, are we allowed to extend it? Is that what you were implying earlier?
Yes, you can extend it. It would be another ordinance done. Actually, I think, let me check the language. No, I think you can end it by resolution. But you would, to extend it, you would have another ordinance
Okay.
in place. I'm just looking here just to verify that that's the case.
While he looks,
That's
Councilmember
fine.
Dillon, if you want to.
Yep, my next question is, do we need to notice the general public when the moratorium is going to expire to give people an opportunity to apply, it's not reapplying, it would be applying at that point? Do we have to put out any type of public notice, or is it just through our meeting when it either lapses or we do a resolution to dissolve it? So that's it. There's nothing else that we have to do in the meantime.
Yes, Councilmember Dillon, I double checked and it will expire either by a resolution by you or 120 days. And if you wanted to extend it, you would do another ordinance that would look very similar to this. If it came to that, if there was still no way of moving forward at that point. So, and we, like I said, we typically suggest that 6 months is kind of the good practice as far as length of time at the most. Some have been upheld in the courts for up to a year, but the less time, the more we can move expeditiously, the better. To answer your second question, no, there's no requirement to notify. It would expire, and the ordinance in place at the time when we can start accepting applications again would be applicable. But that say, you don't have to, but at that point, the city might do the same thing it did when it released the time when applications would start again, or start in the very first place. So it would probably be on the website and some other places, but no, you don't have any legal requirement to do so.
Thank you. And my last question is, and I always wonder about this, when we say 120 days, is that 120 calendar days, business days, days that end in a Y? I mean, how do we calculate that? What is the definition? I always like to have a date certain.
Yeah, it's not business days. It would usually if the days are said without business, then it's just calendar days. But you could make that clarification in your ordinance if you wanted to.
No, that's fine, whatever the normal legal standard is fine. I just want to make sure that we're able to diary it and then work backwards so that we know that we've processing, just to facilitate that, you know, the committees and everything goes through and it comes to council in a timely manner so that we can just speed through the process if need be.
Sure.
So, thank you.
Any additional discussion before we vote on the motion? Mr. Seal?
Yes. So if we pass this ordinance tonight, what's the process going forward? Do we kick this back to the Code Review Task Force?
Yes. My understanding is the Code Review Task Force, which also includes Tom, or legal representation from Dickinson Wright, would discuss this at their next meeting, which I believe is the fourth Wednesday of the month. Is that correct, Mr. Delorico? At 4 o'clock? And those are public meetings, so any council member or member of the public is welcome to attend. And we would follow our normal protocol. So we would rely on the Code Review Committee, staff, and legal counsel to make a recommendation and subsequently bring it back to City Council for review and hopefully, and hopeful adoption.
Okay. And then the second one is, are all the pre-K on record? Are they licensed so we know where they are?
I believe so, but that would be best addressed by the city manager.
Yes, any daycare facility or pre-K that's licensed through the state of Michigan, we can find a record of. There are obviously home daycares, but if it's the intent of council to include daycares, I think you should incorporate something that has a meaningful way to be tracked, which would be state licensed facilities.
Okay. All right. That's all.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seal. Anything else before we vote? Mr. Delorico?
I just wanted to say that a number of these concerns were brought up to council because of what occurred at the planning commission during the special land use application. A number of our citizens came forward with concerns, and particularly the issue about the daycare center was unclear. I think the assumption was that when we put this ordinance together, that definition of schools would include daycare centers, and it was much to the chagrin of many that it was not the case. So at the very least, it deserves a chance to come back to the Code Review Committee for a full evaluation, and that's why I'll be voting in support of this. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Code Review Committee's recommendation is going to change.
And thank you for that, Mr. Delorico. And with the assumption that the motion passes this evening, would you be sure to notify council and, more importantly, the broader community when this issue will be discussed and considered by the Code Review Committee so that folks can either write or attend or participate in that meeting if they feel particularly passionate about any of the acknowledged deficiencies or gaps in the existing ordinances?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to
Very
do
good.
so.
We can also have you work with our PR generalist, Sarah Massey, to make sure that we have information on the web and on social media as well. If there's no additional discussion, we do have a motion on the floor moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss, seconded by Dillon, to acknowledge, to approve, and to adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it, and the motion carries 5-2. We come now to the second public comment period under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes. Former Mayor Pro Tem Linda Tahar, the floor is yours.
Linda Terhar, 108 East Henry. I have to practice that, in Saline. I would ask, speaking in my role as chair of the Code Review Committee, I would ask that you not simply dump this back onto our agenda without some guidance as to what you as council consider the deficiencies that we should address. The Code Review Task Force is, we've worked on this, we've talked about this quite a bit in the group. The Code Review Committee is an advisory body, not a policy-setting body. And we see our role as carrying out assignments, either from the public or from council, to make recommendations to council for their consideration, which we've been doing all along. So again, I would ask you simply, not to simply dump this back in our laps without some clear guidance as to what are the issues you would like us to address. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any additional citizen comments? Yep, please. And while Mr. Goodman comes to the podium, thank you for that, Chairperson Tahar. And between legal counsel and staff, we will make sure that there is a a thorough memo and support material that's provided in your packet in advance of the next code review committee meeting, outlining some of the deficiencies and concerns that have been discussed by council members, more specifically to Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh's point that were outlined and noted publicly at the most recent planning commission. So you will have some guidance and some direction that I think will help to facilitate a very focused discussion at your next meeting. Thank you. My apologies, Ben.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, Ben Goodman, west side of town. I own what I posted on social media, and yep, I did it, and I'm guilty for that, and I have tough skin. I don't think this whole process was transparent at all, and I've shared that with a couple of you. That whole west side of town's been underrepresented for a long time in this town, and we kind of felt left out. There's a lot of us there that it has nothing to do with Mickey's anymore. We all feel marginalized back there. We have a lot of addicts a little bit back there. We have a lot of people that are struggling back there, and we just don't feel that that's the right place to put a facility near daycare, near residential areas, and underrepresented neighborhood areas. And we really would like you guys to consider that when you start doing ordinances like this. We'd also like you to look at schools and daycares together because they're children. And I understand that there's places that serve alcohol close by. But this is a whole new ballgame when you're bringing something new that is a chemical substance that people can become addicted to. And I've seen the worst parts of it. In my previous career, I've seen pretty nasty things that have to do with that, both medical and recreational use. And I think we need to consider that. We need to consider that there's a time and place for everything. I support marijuana, I do. It's just, there's a time and place for everything. And this whole process really needs to be looked at clearly in terms of daycares and neighborhoods. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ben. Any additional citizen comments? And Clerk Royal, I'll defer to you. Do we receive any comments during or before tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their statement read at this time? Very good. Well, unless there's anything else to be brought before Saline City Council this evening, the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor?
I'm sorry,
I
yes.
think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think Zach wanted to speak at public comment, but I'm not. Zach, did you still want to speak?
I think I want to speak about the stuff in Saline. I know that you're talking about marijuana, but there's one thing I know about is I think marijuana is brought to the police and stuff. I know they do stuff about it, but in Pittsburgh Township, I think the Pittsburgh Township area, I think they listen to the problems down there, about marijuana and stuff, and that's probably what they should be doing.
Very good. Thank you, Zach.
Yep.
If there's nothing further, then the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 6:58 PM. Moved by Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. All those in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.